Good evening. May I welcome you to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee, taking place in Walton Street.
Just keep your microphone.
I'm so sorry, David. Please may I welcome you to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee, taking place in Walton Street, Winchester, Guildford. The time is 6:30 p.m. My name is Councillor Margot Power, Chairman of the committee. Please now advise that the meeting is being audio recorded and live streamed from the Council's website. In addition, a video recording of the meeting will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting. Please can I remind officers joining virtually to turn off their cameras and mute their microphones until invited to speak. Could I remind members to speak clearly and remember to mute your microphones, especially the chair. Finally, please may I ask everyone to ensure that mobile phones and other electronic devices are on silent or switched off entirely. Thank you very much. Councillor Godfrey.
Madam Chair, I wonder if it's big, your permission have all the air conditioning units switched off, and there's inappropriate for us to be running these electronic devices. And when we are trying to meet the challenges of a times of notice.
What is the opinion of the committee on this? Anybody? Are we in favour of turning off the air?
I'm not sitting in the corner very far from the door. I think Councillor Godfrey is enjoying the benefits of the position closest to the door right now.
I can happily switch places.
Would you like to move it? And then we can turn the aircon off.
Like
it's in hearing. That's the good thing. It's in hearing.
No, it's complete hypocrisy to come on.
Let's see how it goes.
Yeah,
I don't be electricity, so else be using it.
I am very happy that if the conditions become unbearable, we turn the aircon back on again. So please speak, should you wish to do so. We'll just give you a minute to change everything.
That's special.
I can open that. Or touch it.
No, I can't open this.
You have my name.
I'll make it a minute. Welcome, Councillor France. We're going to see how we go with the air conditioning turn off. If you start to expire, please let us know. Thank you. Are we such a company? Ready to go? Thank you very much. Mr. Blakemore, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies received from Councillor Beddoes. Thank you, Chair.
Very much. And do we have any disclosures of interest for members? Councillor Prass.
Thank you, Chair. I also have a non-original interest in employee effectiveness.
Thank you, Councillor Prass. No more. Moving on to Chairman's announcements. A meeting has been arranged with Mrs. Kirkman and Councillor Godfrey to work out how we can best move forward the review of non-operational assets. We came to the conclusion that it would not be sorted out in a committee meeting, but by hopefully face-to-face discussion, we will be able to resolve that and ensure we don't tread on the toes of any other committee, which is quite important. The next agenda item is on pages 5 to 8 of your agenda to note the Audit and Governance Committee Work Programme 2021 to 2022. Ms. Clotham, I think you'd like to have a few words on this.
I've got a comment to make about a discussion in the last meeting, and I think a few schemes will also follow up around the future work programming as well. But I think at the last meeting, has asked for to bring forward an update on staff welfare and returning office and those sort of issues ahead of the pay policy, pay and We have reviewed our potential back and capable members that we have determined that we'll take a very measured approach to any changes since the relaxation of COVID rules. We are continuing to operate on the same basis as we have been for many months. We are not expecting any significant return of staff to the offices ahead of September. And we've discussed that with the unison or full agreement with the approach that we're taking. And so we think that, it would be more appropriate to bring that update on the changing working practices along to the November meeting and alongside the papers.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And Mrs. Keys.
Thank you, Chair. There is an update required to the work programme to reflect the now planned delay to the audit of the accounts, which I'm sure our external auditors from EY will mention later. So the audited financial report and the associated audit results report will now need to come to the November meeting of the committee. And as a result, the annual audit letter will then follow to the March committee date. So that does only leave one agenda item for September. So I would ask the committee if they would like to add the public sector quality duty item to the November agenda instead and revert to the original plan of having 4 meetings this year.
Our members, do we have a view on this? Thank you, Mrs. Keys. It will make for rather a full agenda in November. Councillor Godfrey, your view, please.
And I think there's concern because the subsequent meeting in March is also quite full. We can't allow them to slip. So if there's any opportunity to bring things forward, would be very welcome. What comes to mind would be the consideration of the HR policy that we agreed at the last meeting to include in the agenda, and any consideration of the non-operational assets would be determined in our meeting in August. May also be suitable for the September meeting. If there is an opportunity to include it there, and it's appropriate.
Mr. Botham, I think that would give us a resourcing problem.
It would do with regard to the vacancy review that the work is scheduled to roll forward towards that November meeting. So bringing that forward to September would be very difficult. Any outcome from the discussion on non-operating assets that be subject to the discussions there, but there is potential.
Members, would you like us to sit and wait and see what we can move forward with the non-operational assets, or would you like to cancel the September meeting and move the business to November? Could I have another view, please?
Could we then rather than if September is a problem, which would be capacity to give any report by that stage, reschedule for a meeting perhaps in December. So we have sufficient capacity to deal with the workload.
I would be quite happy with that, and that's something that I feel would work better with resources. Mr. Botham, do you have a view on that?
That was certainly taken out of the amended programme for the auditing of the accounts, and with the bring forward meaningful papers to split it. So we can certainly improve the capacity for the additional meeting. We've also just shifted the meeting now.
Can we leave officers to look at that and arrange matters accordingly? Mrs. Keys, are you happy with that?
Yeah, that sounds fine, Chair.
Thank you very much, councillors. That's an excellent result. Thank you very much. The minutes of the previous meeting on pages 9 to 12 of your papers, are those agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We don't have any public participation, so we move on to agenda item 7, the external audit plan, on pages 13 to 56 of your papers. Mr. Suter, will you be presenting this?
I'll start, Chairman, with a few introductory words, and I'll hand over to James to take you through some of the detail.
Thank you.
So, good evening, members. So this is our usual planning report for the financial year ending 31st of March 2021. So as I said, before I hand over to James to take you through some of the elements of the key risks, I wanted to highlight a couple of potential items. And the first of that is the timing of the delivery of this plan and therefore the subsequent audit, which has impacted your work programme as you've just discussed. So the plan is presented to you later in the fall. We would usually like to bring this committee meeting around March time. This is a result of the backlog that's been created by the COVID-19 pandemic, with changes to timetables last year, moving everything backwards, and general difficulties in auditing this current environment. So therefore, we weren't in a position to be able to bring to you the plan in March. And I'm afraid this is going to continue to affect the timing of our audit for the year. Because we're not as far ahead as normal, we have comparatively more work to do by the target date of 30th of September. And that is obviously a shorter time than last year when we had until November to undertake that work. Unfortunately, and we're not alone in this position, other suppliers are affected as well. We just cannot achieve that across all our audits to the high standards of quality that are demanded of us. So therefore, we've had to take a difficult decision to reschedule a number of audits from their traditional timing. And for many of those to undertake them after the 30th of September date. It's not something we've done lightly, but it's a decision weighing up the alternative, which would be to start a number of audits and not know how and when we will be able to complete them. We know from experience that's not efficient. It's not just a position for us, but it's also for the experience of the officers as well. It doesn't allow them to plan effectively for when we'll be able to undertake the work and to resolve it. So what we've done is reviewed our applications and decided we would start and complete our major local authorities. So those are the authorities that are over £500 million of expenditure. We've taken the decision to start with those because they feed into the national audit offices, whole of government account work. So we're maximising the assurance we can provide to the NEO in their responsibilities. And then we review the scheduling of our other audits, so district and city councils, for example, to see that when we can assemble an appropriately skilled and knowledgeable audit team to undertake those audits. So for Winchester City Council, this means that we will commence the work in September, but given that's only a few weeks before the target date, in all likelihood, we are unlikely to be able to complete the audit by the 1st of September. We know this is not a welcome move, but I wanted to ensure that I was clear this is not some sort of judgment around the quality of your accounts or your officer team or their ability to support the audits. It's most definitely not. If we had such an incentive, we would tell you directly. So that's the timing. I thought I would also ensure I mentioned the elements of the fees within our audit plan, given the debates we had at the last meeting which we attended. So we have not heard back from public sector audit appointments since submitting the fees for last year's audits, and so unfortunately I have no update to be able to provide to you on the status of prior year fees. As an element of that additional request related to a decision to rebase the fee, we've continued to include that element within our audit plan. But again, this is still subject to the SAA review and decision. And as I've said, we haven't heard back from them, so it's still tentative at the moment. So having set out those elements of background, I'll be handing over now to James just to take you through the context of the plan and the key risks that we'll be focusing on in the delivery of the work.
Thank you, Mr. Suter. Mr. Stutterford, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, I'd just like to take you through the overview of our audit strategy for 2021, which is on page 19 of the reporting packs. And that's really just to focus on the new areas of risk that we've identified for this current year. So on page 20, we refer to the compensation scheme for sales fees and charges. For this year, we've identified it as a potential fraud risk. And it relates to the COVID-19 grants in this particular area. We separated it out from the just general account of the COVID-19 income, as this particular grant has got more of an estimation involved in it. The council had to provide central government with details of that loss of income, and there's obviously an element of estimation involved in that. So yeah, therefore we've identified it as a fraud risk based on its size against our materiality. And as mentioned, we do have another area of inherent risk on file this year, which is related to the accounting for COVID-19 related grants. And we have this on for all councils, just because it is a new area of accounting for this year. There's quite a significant amount of COVID grants that have been supplied to the council. So we just want to run through them and check that the grants have been accounted for appropriately, taking into account the Asian or principal arrangements. And then for the just other risks that we have on file, this is consistent with the prior year, so we have focused on fraud risk in revenue recognition, in particular around PPE additions, records as well. And we've continued to maintain significant risk around valuation of land and buildings, in particular those that are valued at fair value or existing use value. And we also have the pension liability valuation as a inherent risk as we do every year. And then finally, I just wanted to move you down to another change in the plan for this year, which relates to value for money. So that's on page 33 in your reporting packs. And just really to highlight to you the changes in the AO code of audit practice for this year. And so usually we would provide you with a value for money conclusion as part of our audit or results report. But for this year, there's a slight change in that we won't provide you with a conclusion, but we provide you with a commentary in your proper arrangements to secure economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in the use of resources. And this commentary is provided to you in annual auditor's report, which replaces the annual audit letter. So this will be delivered at similar sort of timings, just a slight change in the reporting. So yes, that's what I want to bring to your attention. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scotland. Members, do we have any questions? Councillor Christ and Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Interesting to see the new audit activity required around the COVID grants. Clearly, the government has paid out a lot of various funding to various bodies related to COVID. The identified risk of fraud is certainly there, so worth doing for sure. Could you talk about what's involved with that, what that looks like, what processes have been developed maybe for other councils? Is there a standard practice for that fraud, in that risk? Any indication of where the risk comes up, where issues are created, where exposures are created, and what level of exposures we might imagine. I'm interested where this activity has come from. It has come from central government. So what had it been included? It's the right thing to do. I'm just interested as to it's the right thing. And also, I don't see any reference. Clearly, there's work associated with this. So I don't see any reference to any fees associated with work. So I wonder how that gets addressed so we don't have this surprises down the road. Thank you.
Yeah, so in particular for the sales fees and charges, we separated that out mainly due to the size of the grant for Winchester, so it's below our materiality level. But other councils, it doesn't quite hit their materiality, so it's not across all councils that we want to audit, we're separating it out. But in particular, what we'll be looking to do for that grant is just getting an understanding of the council's process of how they come to their figures that they identify central government, whether that's relying on previous budgets, or if those budgets were created before the pandemic, for instance, we can probably gain more assurance over those. Then a budget that's been revised closer to the time when the grant was announced, for instance. So really just reviewing those budgets and then seeing how the process has gone through as a starting point, and then seeing if we need to do any additions, whether we need to make our own estimates or whether we can rely on management estimates. And looking at just the wider scene for the grants overall, part of the process we're doing at the moment is looking at all the councils that you want to audit and getting them to submit to us their grant return and how they are accounting for them in their statements. Just gives us kind of progress and assurance that councils are doing a similar thing. And while it it could be that all the councils are doing the wrong thing potentially, but this provides us with a bit of property insurance that that things are being done consistently. And again, we will just see whether what Winchester are doing in particular matches up with central government grants, the documentation they provided, along the terms and conditions that are involved, and that sort of thing, just to check it's being put into the correct sort of column. So it's more of a disclosure rather than a particularly for risk, for instance, that we've identified with fees and charges. Is there any other elements you wanted to point out? Sorry, just there's quite a lot long questions I might miss a bit.
Yeah, no, apologies, I tend to do that. So I think it's more a case of, is this something that central government has required as it comes through the PSAA, for example, in terms of special services? Is it something that the NI has chosen to
Yeah, so that's something that EY is particularly chosen to do, just on the basis of being a new piece of accounting, that there is then a higher inherent risk around that. So we haven't been instructed by central government to do that in particular. And just in relation to the fees, it's at this point in time, it does depend on how much additional work we need to go into. So if we are able to get sufficient assurance of management's estimation processes or the work that provides us all clearly documented, it should be a lower amount of hours in addition to what we would be expected to do. So at this point, I can't give you an exact figure, but as when we find out, we can certainly let the management team know what we're expecting to be, to try and reduce those surprises, as you mentioned.
Thank you, Councillor Prass. You have a supplementary, I can see it at one.
So thank you. So I wasn't quite sure if I understood if this will lead to additional work which you'll quote for later, or it would come under the normal processes, and maybe if there's issues you identify we need to explore further, then there'll be a further request coming forward.
Yeah, so this is an additional scope item, so this will be an additional fee involved with it. I can't give you the exact figure of what that would be, but it will depend on the amount of hours that have to be involved in it. If we're able to rely on management's estimates, the additional fee will be lower. If we have to make our own estimates, we don't rely on management's figures, then that obviously the additional hours will be greater, but the full fee will rise with that.
Thank you. Mrs. Keys, I think I'm going to ask you here. I seem to remember that there was an administration element of the COVID income and service fees compensation. Do we have the capacity to make a provision for yet another increase in fees from that fund?
We don't have a budget to cover additional audit fees. The budget is set on the scale fee that we anticipate being charged.
Thank you, Mrs. Keys. Councillor McCready.
If I may, I have two questions, but I'll put one and then see what it is. You mentioned about the change in the value of money reporting. Could you explain two things? Why is this changing? It's been so clear for so many years. What the auditor's view of the value of money pressures are in a authority. And secondly, a commentary report will require interpretation. How will I and my fellow councillors be able to interpret what you write in terms of the value of money commentary? Please.
So the reason for the change is the fact that the National Audit Office had to republish a code of audit practice every 5 years. They published their new code of audit practice in 2020, and that's the one we now have to follow. They consulted on that quite a while ago, and I think the thrust of the change was about providing, rather than just a simple binary conclusion, whether you had arrangements or not, to bring the commentary in, so the basis of our conclusions was more accessible to members of the public, so they could see what we had seen, what we had reviewed, and could understand what arrangements you actually had in place. How will you understand that commentary? So the criteria that value for money set out is against three areas: financial resilience, governance, and use of resources. We have a series of questions, or the National Audit Office has set a series of headline questions. So underneath those, we will be documenting our commentary on what those arrangements are. We will be trying to make that as simple and accessible and understandable as we possibly can, not filled with jargon. And I think a number of those areas will be familiar to members of this committee through their everyday working practices. So issues that you see in terms of financial statements, in terms of risk management. So hopefully it won't require the committee members at least a great deal of interpretation, and that will be our aspiration as well for members of the public who might choose to access the report.
Thank you, Mr. Seaver. And your second question, please.
It turns us to the issue of the fee, but now compounded by the revised timeline. I'm being very second rate as far as authority goes. Why, when we are now fully responsible for the audit fees for external auditor, does our contractor for this service feel it is acceptable to unilaterally increase the fee and deliver the service late? On a subject which is there to comment on our capacity and ability to deal with financial control and governance. How can we trust your view when you don't seem to be able to manage your own affairs?
Mr. Seaver, would you like to take that one?
So in terms of not managing our own affairs, that is absolutely what we are doing. We have a huge backlog of work from the prior year, and we are managing that as effectively the best way we possibly can. The key element for us is that we are reporting not to management, we are reporting to the stakeholders, which is effectively members of the public. Members of the public don't have a choice in their tax or in the use of the tax-based funding, other than through ballot box, of course, and so they are our primary audience. We have to make sure that we're doing proper work to the right standards as assessed by our regulators, and that takes time. We can't do more work in less time in coping with the backlog from COVID-19, and so therefore, as I explained earlier, we've had to take a hard decision in terms of rescheduling the number of audits. That's, again, I said that's not a commentary on Winchester, it's not a view on your ability to provide value for money, it's not a commentary on your view to provide a decent set of accounts. It is a factual position for us, in common with other auditors, that we just do not have sufficient resources to meet those deadlines. In terms of the fee, whether or not we can meet the September deadline, we still have a scope of work to undertake, and when that scope of work exceeds the scale fee in our interpretation, we will seek additional fees. That's not an arbitrary position. The contract with the council is for public sector audit appointments, and we submit all fee requests to public sector audit appointments for their determination. So it's not an arbitrary decision or an arbitrary position of the auditor.
Thank you, Mr. Seaver. Do we have any other questions on this topic? I see none. Do we have any debate? Yes, Councillor, please.
Having worked for the last 18 months, effectively on major projects for another local authority, I know that it's been entirely possible for us to continue, even during the lockdowns, to deliver administrative support to a very high standard. I am also aware that when I enter into a contract to deliver a piece of work, I set a fee, and that fee is what I get, however much effort it takes. So I continue to be disappointed that our auditor, who is meant to judge our performance, still feels that entering into a contract in 1 year and then trying to bump up the price without going out to further tender is an acceptable way forward. And I think tarnishes our relationship with that Excel also. I hope that proves to be not the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. We're in a slightly difficult position with this, aren't we? Because it's a PSAA collective costings. I don't know if, what do we expect from PSAAs on this matter?
PSAA's role is to arbitrate, for want of a better phrase, and to decide whether the fee that the external audit firms are proposing to charge is reasonable. So it comes down to their decision at the end of the day.
Should perhaps our complaints be addressed to PSAA?
Yes, Chair, we did send a letter on behalf of the committee to PSAA expressing our disappointment at the situation with our audit fees.
And have we had a response?
No.
That's very encouraging. Would we like to record our disappointment at the continual increase? Well, no, that would be unfair. We've already recorded our disappointment at the increase in fees, have we not? And I think Councillor Crass brought forward that we are at risk of seeing a further increase in fees as a result of further work to be done. But I'm a little at a loss as to where we would wish to take that complaint. That's fantastic.
I think actually it's very difficult because there is going to be additional work because of this, and to be fair to them, they haven't got a clue until they start it how much it's going to be. So I think, you know, the additional work due to the COVID problem is very unfortunate, but very difficult for them, to be fair to them, to quantify at the present moment, because it could still carry on with other things coming in, or problems turning up from some of the grants we've either made or received. So I can sympathise with their dilemma on the extra work for the COVID situation.
So we've expressed our sympathy and our disappointment.
Yeah, okay.
Who's died?
But we don't really see any way forward without waiting on the information from the PSAA. We are asked to note the external auditor's audit strategy and to approve the indicative annual audit for the subject PSAA approval and the proposed rebasing. Are we happy to do that? Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know that the fee proposal includes reference to additional COVID work. So it's difficult to approve it without knowing that without it being expressed.
So the fee quoted in the report is the standard scale fee, and then the rebasing that the auditors have requested, given the increased scope of the work. So it's not related to COVID, additional COVID work. Just looking to giving a nod on that.
Yes, we included the scale fee with the PSAA steps, and we included then the element from last year, the scale fee rebasing, and the unknown variation. Councillor Miller is quite correct. We just don't know at this point in time. We just put in those two different terms. If members perhaps might want to compromise on this issue, you could resolve to agree the scale fee, because that's the elements that would have been previously consent, with all other elements to be agreed or approved by the PSA or in due time. We will, of course, be bringing further information back on the fees as we undertake that audits. So you're not committing yourself at this point to an open envelope in terms of numbers.
That appeals to me, but does it appeal to you as well? So we've changed the wording of the resolution to approve the indicative 2020, no, the indicative 2021 audit fee, subject, and then remove the PSA. Mrs. Keys.
Chair, so I think what committee asked them to do is approve the scale fee for 2021. as set out in the report.
Thank you very much. Are we happy? Is that agreed with this?
Yeah.
Are you happy with that, Mr. Clayborne?
Thank you,
We're
Chair.
just approving the scale of the code. Thank you very much. We shall move on to the next paper, which is item 8, the annual governance statement, pages 57 to 72. And I think Mr. Howson, you wish to introduce this? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. The annual governance statement set before you sets out a number of proposed actions that we will undertake during the year. It's a backward look at governance issues that were identified during the last financial year, and those were alluded to in the report itself, and we will bring you an update on progress against those actions in your quarterly monitoring report. This is an annual report that we bring to you every year. Previously, members have asked for us to highlight the changes between the 2 years, and earlier this week a document that compared the two versions and highlighted and tracked changes, the difference between last year and this year's report, which hopefully members found useful. I just bring to your attention the significant changes to the document for this year, and they're largely around the introduction of the CIPA Financial Management Code 2019, which brings into, which we commentate on the impact of COVID. And you see a number of paragraphs through section 6, which identify the measures that the council put in place to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and any governance issues that arose from that. There's also a particular element there, paragraph 6.13, which looks at the financial implications of COVID there in accordance with that financial management code. In terms of the issues that we included last year, a number of those were completed and won't be rolled forward to the new annual governance statements, and therefore they are removed from the annual governance statements. I should refer to those. So business continuity was there previously, and as we've alluded to before, at this committee we received substantial assurance from our internal audit review last year, so that has not been carried forward to the new annual governance statement. Similarly, the restoration and recovery plan, which is now incorporated into strategic service plans, starting to become more business as usual, and similarly the financial recovery plan, which is now incorporated in all the financial planning that we do, the medium-term financial strategy. So there are two issues being carried forward, which are partnership working and quality impact assessment, where the actions weren't completed during the last financial year, and we'll roll forward the issues into the new year with those actions appearing in the action plan that is appended to the AGS, and we'll continue to monitor against those actions in the quarterly monitoring report until those are completed. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Howson. Would we like to hear from Mr. Harvey first before we take questions, members? Are you speaking on this one, Mr. Harvey? No, sorry, I've just lost the plot completely. Any questions for Mr. Howson? Yes, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if this is a question for this paper or the paper later in this meeting, but I'm looking particularly at section 5.1 of the paper. And more question about the absence of a statement rather than the inclusion of a statement. There's no mention there of the role of ward councillors, and I can imagine that there is a risk that in taking a decision without requiring consultation with the ward councillors, that the ward councillor may in fact hold information that may be pertinent to that decision, and not requiring or not encouraging the involvement of ward councillors in decision making may in fact be a risk to good governance. I just really wanted your thoughts and comments on that. Why weren't ward councillors included in this section?
I think I take the comment that you made around risk. In fact, that particular risk that you've alluded to is included in our corporate risk register, which is on a later paper. I'm not sure that it would necessarily be appropriate unless that actual governance issue arose, that we'd actually then include it in the annual governance statement going forward. I think it's relevant, yes.
I'll bring it up later again. Thank you.
Any more questions, Mr. Howson? Okay. Thank you, and Councillor Crass.
Thank you, Chair. If I'm understanding this correctly, just in terms of the paper itself, It was a very interesting reading service. I appreciate the detail in it. It was very thought-provoking. Section 5.3, page 65, talks about the council's constitution, clear guidelines to ensure the business is dealt with in an open manner, except in circumstances in which you should have kept confidential. Meeting for the public, except on personal confidential matters being discussed. How do we determine what's personal or confidential? And who does that?
Oh, Mrs. Hicks, I think.
There are specific circumstances where decision making can be done in exempt session, but to be exempt, it has to meet particular criteria. Don't have the detail on what those criteria are at the moment, but they're set out for us to follow. So it has to meet that criteria for it to be an exempt session.
And who lays out these criteria?
I believe they're set out in our constitution, but there is, I think it's within the Local Government Act.
It's defined in the Local Government Act, and it would be to the determination of the monitoring officer as to whether an authority or who is seeking to declare as confidential compliance with those regulations. So that's the process.
Any more questions, Councillor Godfrey?
Thank you, and guidance on personal sensitive data is issued by the Immigration Commissioner's Office, which is a really useful guide to keeping your money in your pocket rather than fine. In the last page of the report, it deals as an action plan. There are a couple of items which haven't been delivered in the last 12 months. Particularly partnership working, which are well overdue on current action plan. It's sensible to reschedule, but how confident are we, given the proximity of these dates, we asked to note, that they will be met, and what's the impact if they aren't?
These actions that will deliver the partnership working are actually internal audit actions arising from the working in partnership internal audit that was completed either last year or the year before, and they've carried through. The actual corporate head that's responsible for those actions is also responsible for a number of the COVID restoration and recovery initiatives, and therefore this has had to take a little bit of a back seat. But I'm assured that those actions are ongoing, and a number will be completed this month and then throughout the summer. It's also recorded in the quarterly monitoring report, the progress against those actions as well. So confidence that those actions will be completed within those timescales as set.
Any more questions, please, Mr. Nelson and Councillor Russell?
Apologies, not heat stroke and not migraine, so.
Would you like the aircon back on?
No, I'm good, I'm fine, thank you. If a member of the public, related to my previous question, if a member of the public has an issue or question around what goes to the exempt session, how do they, or what steps do they take? Are they taking?
Can they challenge the decision of the monitoring officer? A member of the public.
It's a fair question. I don't have an immediate answer to, but I will review with the monitoring officer and we'll confirm back to the committee what scope there is for that. It certainly appeals to the monitoring officer. That would be the immediate. What obligations we have by way of clarifying reasons for exemption, apart from the college department with paragraph 1 of part 3 of the regulations, whether we need to give more detail than that, I'm not sure, so if I can clarify that.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Any more questions, please, members? And any debate? Thank you. We are asked to approve the annual government statement for 2021. as set out in Appendix 1. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
And we are asked to note the issues and progress on Appendix 1 as well. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Moving on to the next paper, which is on pages, now where are we? Don't write in mine. Pages 73 to 74. Mr. Harvey, I think this one is yours. No? It's Mr. Housen.
Mr. Housen will introduce.
I'm
pick up any bits on.
I'm very pleased, yes, it's been used today. Mr. Housen.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an update on governance issues through quarter 1, which is the period April to June this year. You received an update in quarter 4 only at the last meeting last month. There are a number of issues that I wish to bring to your attention, namely the progress that has been made with the health and safety internal audit actions, which was raised at the last meeting. A lot of progress has now been made, not only to clear some of those actions, but to set out clear direction for the completion of the remaining actions. And more detail is actually given in this report. Since the last report that we took last month, there hasn't been a great deal of time to complete a number of the other actions, such as the partnership audit, as we alluded to the previous item. Those are in training. We hope to have a number of those actions completed by the end of this month and during the summer. I wish to draw to your attention that we've included a new appendix with this report that you won't have seen before with this report, and that is the corporate risk register. At your March meeting, you will have seen the corporate risk management policy with the corporate risk register attached, and as set out in that policy is that this committee will review the risks on the corporate risk register and highlight any risks that it wishes to see on the register, more importantly, any in-depth reviews to gain assurance that those risks are being properly managed. So you'll see a recommendation too that the members may wish to receive a more in-depth review on any of those corporate risks to the November meeting. So this report, as gone before, provides an update on the progress of internal audit actions. There's also an update on the annual governance statement, the issues that were identified in the previous year's annual governance statement, which we referred to in the previous report, as well as the code of conduct complaints and the internal audit progress report, which Mr. Harvey may choose to provide an update.
Thank you, Mr. Housen. I think we'd like to spend some time on the corporate risk register, so I'll treat that as a separate question and debate session, if I may. Mr. Harvey, do you wish to bring anything to our attention?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments really. So the more detailed appendix for us now, which is pages 86 through to 96, just gives a brief summary of where we are in terms of the plan for this year. It's obviously very early days, things so yes, at the end of quarter 1, but about a third of the work was at different stages being up and running with 2/3 yet to commence, which is about in track where we should be. Page 91 gives the complete overview of all outstanding and pending actions resulting from our previous audit reviews, whereas obviously the summary governance report just gives an update on the overdues, and you'll see that there are 3 areas highlighted in bold and denoted in asterisks that confirms that all of those actions are complete. So if you compare one report to the other, you sort of see that it all flows through. And the remainder of the report just gives the summary of where we are in terms of delivering the plan. You may note that we were due to be looking at working in partnership for following up from our previous reviews on previously noted in quarters 2 and 3. Clearly, if some of those actions aren't going to be complete until December, we may look to defer that review. But once we've discussed that with the senior management team and got the agreement, we'll formally bring that back to the committee if relevant, as we would do with any other plan changes. So just as an overview on where we are in terms of the current plan. So there's formally no adjustments at the moment, no proposed new reviews or reviews to come out. No limited on the assurance reviews that haven't previously been reported to the committee. But again, if there's any change on that, we'll bring it to subsequent meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Members, do we have questions? Councillor Lamy? Councillor Becker, thank you.
Repeating my previous question, does the risk associated with board councillors having specialised local knowledge not necessarily having a requirement that that local knowledge is drawn upon when, for example, the cabinet is taking a decision? Is that a risk that is taken into account or ought to be taken into account?
I think that's largely contained in risk CR 003 in Appendix 4, which looks at challenges to decision making and the robust approach has been made to any decision making, including evidence and consultation. It's something that if it's not probably included, we can include going forward, but I think it probably is largely encapsulated in that particular risk as is.
It would be helpful that we could do. It is something that we as a non-cabinet member, ward councillor, there are decisions that are taken in relation to my ward, and I'm sure everyone's wards, that we are not consulted upon, and there is a risk there, I think. So,
Thank you, Councillor Becker. Any more questions?
Apart from the risk.
We will go on to the risk register in some detail, I think. So any more questions on the first part of the report, excluding Appendix 4? Thank you. And the risk register, I think we have a few questions on this, don't we? Councillor Godfrey, would you like to start us on?
Thank you. I get very excited about this. Risk register. Unhealthily so, I know. But, I think it's really useful to go through the this high level corpus, which it does lead to reactions that support many of the activities of this council. I'm concerned by initially by risk CR 003. That the risk score from this challenge risk is seen as being so low. That the impact is modest, the likelihood is unlikely. This experience indicates that this is definitely not the case. Having been taken to dealers twice in recent years, surely the likelihood is actually quite high. And we need to acknowledge that. I don't think that this risk acknowledges the likelihood as well the impact. Shouldn't we have a much higher level of likelihood?
Councillor Butler, would you like to mention that?
I tend to agree. I think I wouldn't put the likelihood very here, but I think it being the lowest portion you want. Person. But I don't know on what basis you assess that, because I mean the proportion of decisions, and this is the difficulty, the proportion of decisions that the council made that are challenged is pretty small. So it could be said that the likelihood is pretty small because the proportion is so small. Problem is, the ones that challenge tend to be major decisions, and so how do you bring that into such a broad description? Personally, I think it actually shows the limitations of a broad corporate one, and perhaps that likelihood of challenge in a particular project would be a lot higher. I'm not sure if it is on general council decisions whether it's right to move it or not. I think perhaps there should be some part of the commentary that individual projects need to take account of the risks being higher, rather than the broad. I don't know how Mr. Nelson might think about that. I think it's one of those things that of it being somewhat subjective.
Mr. Housen.
I think useful comments, obviously, I think this corporate risk register is very much about the risks affecting or impacting on the council achieving its strategic objectives as set out in the council plan. It is very high level. There will be other risk registers that sit beneath this, and there'll be individual project risk registers for the council's significant projects. There are also operational risk registers, which will look at the operational decision making. So there will be one for the team that looks at planning, for example, and other services. So this is very much the risk register that looks at the risks that affect the impact of council achieving its strategic objectives as set out in council plans. So it is very high level. Looking at that impact, with it being so low, that's a 1 in 25% chance of it happening in 1 to 5 years. So that gives you kind of context of the likelihood of happening. So it is in the lowest category of highly unlikely, and that's equated to a 1 to 25% chance.
But surely the impact should be considered as significant.
So the impact at the moment is considered to be moderate, sort of financial, looking at a financial basis up between sort of 20 and 200,000 pounds. So we can have another look at those if we need to.
I think we might, it's difficult, isn't it? Because as you say, this, the very tone of the comments as to what might go wrong and what will happen are very much about comparatively small changes to what we do. Whereas some of our projects could have major impact should things not deliver. So it's almost as if we should have a separate risk description for major projects. Would that be more comfortable? Councillor Cutler?
Yes, I think when one looks at what the risk description is here, it says the challenge due to a lack of strong evidence base, customer insight or engagement. Many of the challenges haven't been around that. They haven't been around, lack of an evidence base or customer insight and engagement. They've been about very often procedural problems. So I wonder if there is a separate risk, the legal challenge element of things rather than a specific getting things wrong procedurally or legally. That's a risk than this description.
Are we happy to ask Mr. Housen and Councillor Cutler to reconsider how those potentially significant risks could be recognised in this risk register? Yeah. Are we happy with that? Councillor Cutler, Mr. Housen? And Mr. Blakemore, are you happy that we are recording that request?
Chair, I can confirm that it is part of our role in the executive leadership was to keep this register under review. I think in light of recent experience and an ongoing challenge currently, it would be timely for us to review that risk and we can build that thinking.
And it's important that the public can see that in this risk register that we are recognising that risk.
And I think we take into account Godfrey's experience of this as well. I think it's worth including in the discussion.
Very grateful, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. Councillor Crask.
Thanks. Probably continuing on this, just so I understand what we're talking about and what we're going to do next. You said that this was a high-level risk register. You would imagine that the same as applies lower down to, for example, major projects?
Yes, there will be a risk register for major projects. There are also operational risk registers as said. So.
Is that something that you're aware of? Is that something that you audit and assess whether those are in place or not?
The auditors are actually reviewing them at the moment. It's an internal audit review of risk management, and it's not only looking at the strategic risk registers, it's also looking at operational risk registers as well, and the arrangements set out in the risk management policy whether they're embedded in the organisation.
Mrs. Keys, sorry.
Yeah, so I was just going to add that all major projects are subject to a highlight report included within the quarterly reporting that goes to scrutiny, and that highlight report does take reference to risk and risk registers for those major projects. So yeah.
Mrs. Keys, did you wish to?
Yeah, very similar point. Every time a report goes forward for a major project, the risk register for that particular project is dependent, so it's reviewed at that time each time, and there is, significant risks such as legal challenge or included in those specific projects. Risk registers given the context of those projects in particular.
And Councillor Christ.
So if that is happening, that should give us some reassurance that there's a trickle-down effect that gets more granular on the different projects. I share the excitement about this register and the registers in general. I think it's a very good one. I think it speaks to the likelihood of the impact and how to see the assessment of that. And it gives a risk owner as well, which obviously differs by different risk. I would hope that same methodology applies to all projects. I don't know that it is, but I would assume and would hope that same methodology would apply to all projects, so that you get a trickle-down effect.
Mrs. Keys, thank you.
Yeah, it does. So the same format is used for the major projects and the operational risk registers that are owned by each service.
We have come a long way on this one in the last 8 years. I think even Councillor Godfrey would agree.
A very long way. Unfortunately, it went backwards again. Yes, it took me 6 years to get onto a project review for the board, and I wasn't replaced by the current administration. I think that's a mistake. Closer scrutiny would be welcome by all.
I want to be very careful we don't tread on scrutiny's toes here.
Oh, no, it's just we say I'm very up in the morning. Speak to people.
So any other questions on the appendix for the risk register? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. While CR 003 needs to be nuanced and the impact on of a challenge for a reason doesn't have a huge impact on the council, apart from reputation. Only councillors lose their jobs when we get re-elected. CR 007 is, I think, more significant. I wonder if this is going to be tempering our activity, particularly right now, where we've got the risk of the Section 114 notice appearing across the country in different authorities who haven't managed their plans very well. The council basically fails, it's taken over, which sounds quite radical, and the impact seems particularly high, although not perhaps for the residents of the district. So this risk, being unable to balance budget, does have the implication that we, and I don't mean councillors, but the officers lose control of the council, which actually seems much more of a perspective of what will happen. And are we reflecting the risk appropriately, given the impact that might happen?
That's a cut, I think, on that one.
Well, I think this isn't about the risk to all councils, it's about the risk to this council. And I think the particular position that we're in at the moment means that we're not anywhere near a risk of a Section 114. If we move towards that, one would hope the risk registers, as we've often talked about, are living things that are changed and reviewed on a regular basis, and as circumstances deteriorate, move into the red and be made aware of it we're moving into the red. I think the situation we're in at the moment, that there are these, the likelihood and the impact are both put in a relatively high position simply because we have no long-term funding from government. Every year, so stick finger in the air and hope on that basis because we've not had a settlement, and I think that's where the risks are for us at the moment. So my view would be it's right where it is at the moment, but obviously this continual review, the current circumstance is one that one needs to be monitoring very closely.
And that is evidenced by the action we took last year.
Well, I hope that it has kept us in this
Comparatively comfortable place.
comparative place. It's never, it's both good and says.
Thank you, but Councillor Lane.
Yeah, CR 009, which is about cyber security. We've seen a vast increase in the number of cyber attacks in the market. Are we confident in our systems and how we can restart if we do get a mouse attack?
Mr. Housen, would you like that one?
Our IT team tell us that we are in a good position with our procedures and barriers, if you like, to a cyber security attack. Our arrangements are audited by our internal auditors to give that external view, as well as other specialists in that field. The council has an IT security officer in place whose job is to ensure that we maintain that resilience as far as possible, protect our IT systems from cyber attack.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Could we just briefly come back to Councillor Becker's point about ward councillor engagement? Because it has been frequently expressed by ward councillors that they do not feel engaged in projects that affect their ward directly. And I think we would like to see that represented somewhere in the risk register. That there is a danger of local knowledge being missed when looking at changes in how we do business. But I'm not sure where it fits, Mr. Housen.
I was reading as you were speaking to see, is it a new risk or does it fit within an existing risk? I don't have the answer right now. I'm happy to take.
I think it would fall very neatly into CR 003, in that was dealing with the evidence base. And ward councillors and where they exist parish council should be expected to contribute where appropriate to that evidence base. I think that's at least puts them on the map.
So under current controls, we would expect to see early engagement with board members. Is that what we would like? Councillor Cutler.
Yes, I think that would be a good place to name ward councillors as part of that process of that we're looking at lack of strong evidence based customer insight or engagement, and they're a key part of all those three things. So therefore they're a key part of the controls, and I think Councillor Caulfield makes a good point that parish councils should be included in that as well.
Ward members and parish councils.
And potentially the town forum as well, but of course the town forum is made up of ward members, so it's a slightly different position to parish council. But as chair, I feel the need to raise it.
Thank you very much. Any more debate on this? Oh, Councillor Caulfield.
Sorry, just one point on CR10. I do believe in what will happen, but this is two risks. There's the important issues of responding to climate emergency and the likelihood of serious reputation damage or failing to meet targets. And then there's a separate risk of major flooding incidents. That may or may not be directly due to climate emergency, but the actions and the risks are entirely separate. We need to think about the flooding and the flood risks, as we know from 2014. That can overrun the city centre and many of our villages. And we have to prepare and acknowledge that and support those agencies in dealing with it. Whereas CR10 is focusing on the climate emergency, which is showing leadership and making us doing our bit to address the global problem. And how can we build a double number of trees in this district? Wouldn't affect flooding in any particular regard. That would require more than 6 million tree growth.
Do you not feel that's covered under CR004?
Well, the current wording with CR10 is giving mixed messages. Either we're dealing with flooding in CR10 or we're dealing with climate emergency. I think climate emergency is a risk that we need to highlight, but so is flooding.
So some is the causes of the effects, and one is the prevention. So if we deal with climate emergency, we may prevent, but in the short term, those extreme weather events, I think, is the technical term, isn't it?
Yeah.
Councillor Cutler, I'm sorry.
I mean, there is this separation between mitigation for climate change, which is what Councillor Goff was talking about, I think, is responding, recognising, mitigating for the effects of climate change. And the other is prevention of climate change by reduced carbon. And in a way, they're two separate areas, and how you respond to them. So, I mean, there is a strong argument that there's not enough is being done about mitigation at the moment, nationally or internationally, as we're seeing this last 3 or 4 weeks.
Any more debate, members, please? I think we have 3 actions coming out of the risk register. Ms. Blakemore, would it be so if we detailed those first, while they're fresh in our minds? So CR003, we're recommending that ward members and parish councils be added to the list of current controls. On CR10, we're asking that the mitigation for events caused by climate change be recognised as a separate risk. Is that fair? And on what is it, CR7? No, not CR7. It's the CR3. We're asking that how do we put it, Mr. Howson? The potential substantial risk from significant projects be recognised separately and assessed separately.
Yes, that's exactly what we agreed.
Mr. Blakemore, do we have those?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes.
And are we agreeing with this? Thank you very much. Returning to the other recommendation, which is on page 73, regarding audit governance, are asked to note the content of the report, the progress against the internal audit management actions, and raise any issues with the cabinet member. Are we happy to do that, members? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Howson. Thank you, Mr. Harwood. And that brings us to item 10, the Treasury Management Outturn Report on pages 105. Mrs. Farley, would you like to introduce this paper?
Thank you. So this report fulfils the Council's legal obligation to have regard to the SIPRI code and provides an update on the performance of the Treasury Management Function during 2020-2021. All Treasury activity has complied with relevant statute guidance and accounting standards. Treasury activity has also complied with the Council's Treasury Management Strategy and Investment Strategy for the financial year, other than that has already been reported. Table 2 on page 111 of the report shows the Treasury Management position as at the 31st of March 2021 and changed during the year. This table shows that the net borrowing position has increased by £16 million due to a new £10 million PWRB loan to finance HRA capital expenditure, in addition to a reduction in investment balances of £6 million. At the 31st of March 2021, the Council held £166.7 million loans, which related to the financing settlement of the HRA in 2012. During 2021, there have been no maturing PWRB debt, and as mentioned, the Council has taken out an additional £10 million in long-term PWRB debt. Table 5 on page 113 of the report shows the Treasury investment position at the 31st of March 2021. Investment balances have reduced primarily as a result of the capital programme and reduced income due to the impact of COVID-19. A large proportion of investment balances continue to be held as short-term investments to enable the funding of the capital programme, as well as to meet the Council's business as usual working capital requirements. In delivering investment returns, the Council has operated against a backdrop in which the UK bank rate was capped to 0.1% in March 2020 in response to the pandemic. It has remained at this rate throughout the year, having an impact on rates across the market. Returns have been at or around 0% for liquid investment options and have not been significantly higher for other short-term options. Investment income has therefore largely come from investments arranged at fixed rates of interest prior to the pandemic and through the Council's investment in a pooled property fund. The Council's investment in the pooled property fund fell considerably in value when the pandemic hit 12 markets, but in the last year the capital value has stabilised, reflecting the broader commercial property market. This recovery means this investment is now worth only marginally less than the capital market value at 31st of March 2020. And due to the Council's long-term holding in this fund, the capital market value remains significantly above the amount invested, as shown in Table 7 on page 116. This demonstrates the importance of taking a longer-term approach and being able to ride out periods of market volatility, ensuring the Council is not a forced seller at the bottom of the market. The Council's investment in the pooled property fund targets long-term price stability and regular revenue income and brings significant benefits to the revenue budget. The annualised income returns have averaged 3.31% per annum since purchase. The pooled property fund's performance and continued suitability in meeting the Council's investment objectives is monitored regularly and discussed with the Parliament House. Pages 118 and 119 run through the various limits and indicators that apply to the Council's Treasury activities. Pages 119 to 121 provide information on the 2 consultations launched by SIPA on changes to its Prudential Code and Treasury Management Code of Practice, with the most recent update that SIPA has now issued a response stating that a further consultation on these 2 codes will be issued later in July, with the intention of the new codes being in use from December this year. Thank you for listening. That's all I was planning to say.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Farley. Do we have any questions for Mrs. Farley? Councillor Grass.
Thank you, Mrs. Farley. It's I found it a very readable paper, so thank you very much. Probably just my own education, I might say things, I apologise for this. It's Table 1. It identifies that the CFR rose by 42 million due to an increase in both the general fund and housing revenue accounts and the need to borrow. But we only borrowed 10 million from the public works loan pools. The rest of it came from internal borrowing. What's internal borrowing?
So that's the Council's reserves.
Okay. Very clear, thank you. Notes.
Okay. Councillor Cross. Any other questions? Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you. I was going to ask, why didn't we borrow £10 million in also internally rather than going to BWLB? But more pertinently, I expect in a couple of years' time, if memory serves, we'll come to the first of our repayment points for the HRA bulk borrowing. Are we looking at paying off or renewing a borrowing to meet that imminent repayment point? And should we be considering, while interest rates are low, borrowing for need?
Would you like to take that one, Mr. Boatley?
I think start and Ms. Eason's part, maybe they help me out if I don't frustrate too far off message. But no, with regard, the first question was around the what should we not return borrow that 10 million? But that 10 million was borrowing ahead of me, so that was really just to secure the low rates at that moment. There was at that time an indication of rate increasing, so that's why we determined to secure loans at below 2%. That has now stabilised, and the current price for money close is not borrowed ahead of need in the current climate because they're still fluctuating. And we monitor that advice very closely and keep that position under constant review. It's fair to say.
And the second part of the question, does that answer your question, Councillor Godfrey?
It does, because my follow-up question was about the impact of inflation, as we know it's going up. We've already done the things that would push us. Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you. Thank you. Right. I'm sorry, Councillor Cross.
Thanks. I'm just interested to get more information around our strategy for investments in Sector 5. As you said, the money market rates are low right now, 0.01. We have some 5 million in high yield investment for property funds. Is it on too close to help with the decision around how much we have distributed around various funds and various investments?
So our inflows do provide us with some overall guidance on how we distribute the cash over the investments and making sure that the portfolio is diversified. The council is mostly using its cash at the moment to fund its capital programme, with an awful lot of money being required each month. So that's why we're keeping funds as liquid as possible at the moment. And unfortunately, that means that the interest rate received is quite low. But Arlene Close really recommends investments in money market funds, just because a money market fund itself is made up of investments into lots and lots of other investments. So in itself, it's a very diversified investment, and so that's very good from a risk perspective.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Farr. Are we happy? Any more questions from members? Any debate? We are asked to note the annual Treasury Outturn Report 2021. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Farley. Moving on to agenda item 11. No, agenda item 10. No, 10. Yes, the local code of governance. Mr. Howson, are you introducing this on pages 100?
I am Chair, thank you. This report sets out the update on the local code of corporate governance. It's a report that you see every year, and as before, with the annual statement earlier this week, a document compared last year's edition version of track changes was circulated to members so they could identify where the changes were. There has been no change from the SIFA Solace framework, so fundamentally the document is very, very similar to last year. The 7 principles of governance have not changed and therefore are the same. The only difference that I draw your attention to is the appendix to the report, which takes into consideration members' comments at this, when in the consideration of this report last time, which was about providing further evidence of how the council's arrangements, policies and documents actually evidenced and demonstrated the 7 principles of good governance. So we've rewritten that appendix rather than just listing all the different documents, policies and arrangements. We've actually tried to expand on those and show how those documents actually demonstrate that the council complies with those 7 principles of good governance. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Howson. Do we have questions for Mr. Howson? Councillor Godfrey.
Only I didn't receive any circulation this week.
Okay.
Let that.
Mr. Howson was very.
I know, that's why. You deliberate.
No, I'm sure he would. Mr. Howson, yes, could we check?
Yes, we certainly. Sorry, check. Yes, we certainly check that email and the distributions. And apologise to Councillor Godfrey if we didn't receive it, but we can check and resend if needed.
Any more questions, councillors? Any debate? We are asked to approve the Local Code of Corporate Governance 2021 as set out in Appendix 1. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 4, which is a very readable report, and I think we would like to congratulate officers on how attractive it looks. And very good. Do we have any questions, councillors? Of course you do. Mr. Councillor Gordon, please.
You have to try much harder than that. 2 points. One, I'm used to a statement of accounts being a turgid 560-page document, which we used to go through a statement of accounts committee for 4 or 5 hours at a time. So I wasn't quite sure what this commentary of beginning was all about, and why that was relevant to the statement of accounts which I followed. The exciting bits at the end. I wonder where the what the purpose of this commentary of beginnings was.
Mrs. Keys, please.
I'm sure SIFA will be very pleased to hear from the committee that their efforts to make it a more accessible and short document to make it easier to read as seems to have worked. The narrative statement, so the first part of the document, is a requirement of the accounts and audit regulations, and the intention is to provide a context for the accounts, given the council as an organisation, so it describes the organisation, and it's there to try and help demonstrate the extent to which the council plan objectives have been achieved as a result of the spending in the year. So it's trying to link those 2 parts together.
Thank you, Mrs. Keys. I found the earlier part of the report very attractive indeed. I think it goes a long way to explain what we are doing and how. And Councillor Godfrey, I fear that most of the population will find it very much more interesting.
I think you're kidding yourself. People having the council reports and suggestions help, and nobody ever read them. It's great.
Do we have any questions of risk. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you. Apart from a jolly good read, not entirely sure at the moment to make out after, but I wouldn't want to decide. Excellent. In the corporate risk register, 07, one of the current controls is the approach of using outcome-based budgeting. How does this statement of accounts demonstrate the use of outcome-based budgeting? One would you give me some examples from the paper notes?
Who would like to take that? Mrs. Keys, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, outcome-based budgeting is a methodology used for creating a budget, and that is monitored quarterly as the quarterly reports come through the performance panel and onto cabinet. The statement of accounts is intended to give a financial accounting view of the outcome of the finances in the year. So there are notes within the annual financial report which attempt to span the gap between those, so the management accounting side and the financial accounting side. But the primary focus of this document is around the accounting in accordance with international financial reporting standards rather than the monitoring of budget performance.
Councillor Godfrey, are you hankering after the budget book that we used to see from 2010 onwards, which I found very...
I'm trying to find some use for this 26 pages of introductory concept setting commentary. In terms of financial management, and I'm struggling to see what the purpose of it is if it doesn't describe how we have spent our money.
Mrs. Keys, I think you said it was is it standard now to provide a narrative?
Yeah, it's part of the accounts and audit regulations. There's a requirement that we publish a narrative statement, and the content of that narrative statement, whilst it's open for organisations to tailor it to their own needs, is essentially the commentary that I said earlier.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Keys. Any other questions from councillors? Any debate? Councillor Crowes.
I think it'll be a question. I think it's a question that I ask all the time, but our reserves are protected reserves. So we'll keep going on.
Councillor Crowes, I'm having difficulty hearing you.
Apologies, I'm trying to find the right page number. Sorry, too far. So restricted reserves increased. Page 181. So we've gone up from 10.3 million to 14.6. We just find that very difficult when I see operational reserves going down. So what's the next? I'm sure it relates to SIL, and I think it's spend SIL for.
It does, Chair. It's exactly that.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions on this report? No debate? Any debate? Sorry, Councillor.
Despite my concern about the value of the commentary and its the explanation for a simple councillor of what we spend our money on, I have to commend the officers for producing an important document with the detail that's required for savings account in a very difficult time, so early in the financial year. I think that does not come by accident. It comes from a huge amount of organisation and hard work. I have to commend the officers for achieving that, and I hope the auditors appreciate the excellence of the account.
And I'm sure the committee would like to join in those congratulations. It really is an achievement, especially under current work conditions. So thank you very much. Members, we are asked to note the report in respect of the draft statement of accounts. Are we happy to so note?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of this agenda. Thank you very much for your time this evening, and I'm closing the meeting at 20:04 by my watch.